Okay, so I think that we can already start. So hello everyone, and welcome to a new webinar of the HEIMDALL project. Today the presenter is Bruce Farquharson. Sorry, Bruce, if I haven't pronounced well your name.
It's fine.
It's fine, yeah. So Bruce is the lead officer for the civil contingencies at the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service. As a senior officer, Bruce in his organization is responsible for incident planning and risk management of large-scale events. And let me say that Bruce is an active member of the HEIMDALL Project Consortium, in which he's involved as an end user, contributing with his experience in managing command and control centers, because his organization, the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service, is responsible for the management of 8 control centers distributed across the Scottish territory. I think that I'm not wrong, Bruce?
We used to have 8. We've amalgamated now into 3 regional centres, which have a far greater capacity and capability. That's just been the last couple of years, though.
Okay. So today, Bruce will focus his presentation on a flooding event in the basin of the River Dee that affected the town of Ballater and surroundings in Scotland. The event that he will be presenting started on the 29th of December 2015 due to an episode of heavy rains, and continued for a few days beyond the new year in January 2016. Even though this case study has not been subject of any of the HEIMDALL demonstrations that we have been organizing throughout the life of the project, it's been studied, documented, and incorporated into one of our project deliverables. Well, finally, I would like to say thank you to Bruce for accepting taking part of this webinar and for dedicating part of his time to prepare it. I'm sure that we will all enjoy it. And yes, without further delay, now, Bruce, you can please start.
Thank you very much, David, and welcome everybody to this short presentation on the flooding in Ballater. I think it's worthwhile, first of all, to just have a quick look at the context and the risk of flooding in Scotland. So Scotland's had a number of significant flooding events. In 1992 in Perth, the River Tay had severe flooding. It was 6 metres higher than its usual height, and we had to evacuate hundreds of homes on that occasion. In Glasgow 2002, we had 1 month's worth of rainfall in one afternoon, which caused flash flooding all over the city, and 500 homes were affected. The town of Comrie in central Perthshire has had a number of flooding events, but in 2012, over 100 people were evacuated from their homes as a result of heavy rain. And in the south of Scotland, in Dumfries and Galloway, an area called White Sands, we had serious flooding in 2015 as a result of heavy rain, and a number of evacuations took place, with over 2,000 homes without electricity as a result of the flood. So the risk we have in Scotland comes both from rivers and waterways, but also from flooding from the coast and storm surges. And quite often the two happen at the same time, and the water that's flowing down the rivers can't escape into the sea and gets backed up and causes flooding further upriver. And we're seeing more instances of these flooding events, and the impact of climate change is very much being felt. So the Government of Scotland has put in place a number of large-scale flood mitigation measures and large-scale construction programmes to try and mitigate the impact of flooding across the country. When we look at Scotland, just a very simple map, and overlay it with the areas that are identified as having a risk from flooding, you can see that we've actually got quite a challenging situation. And the band of red across the middle in the central belt, that's our most populous area of Scotland, where most of our population live. And it's got more or less coast-to-coast disruption forecast through flooding. However, it's areas further north where there's less population, the impact is often more widely felt because of the infrastructure that exists in the area and the subsequent isolation that can occur as a result of flooding. So we have quite a big problem in relation to this hazard. But I want to focus on Ballater. This is a small town that sits in Royal Deeside, Aberdeenshire. It only has about 1,500 residents. It sits quite high up in the hills of the Grampian mountain range, and it's a popular destination for mountain bikers, hill walkers, and for fishing. In fact, the Dee is a very famous salmon fishing river in Scotland. The village itself, as you can see there isn't much to it, but it's surrounded on 3 sides by the River Dee. The whole town has 1 fire appliance to service all the needs of that population, which is quite a small resource for that area. There are other fire stations surrounding, and obviously all were called in to help with the situation that I'm going to go on to describe. So although we're talking about the impact that Storm Frank had on Ballater, there is a contributory factor immediately beforehand. So on the 23rd of December, Storm Eva hit the UK. A large amount of rain was experienced, and we had flood warnings issued for many areas. Storm Eva presented problems, but there were relatively low number of floods, and it wasn't really outside of the normal parameters for that time of year. So you can see here from the flood warnings that are in place, a large part of Scotland received the rain that Eva deposited on the country. And although there were challenges, it wasn't outside of anything that we're not used to. 6 days later, however, Storm Frank hit Scotland on the 29th of December. The ground was still heavily waterlogged and saturated from Storm Eva, and river levels were still relatively high, and the impact on many areas as a result of both storms coming in quick succession was significant, and on Ballater it was catastrophic. So in Ballater, on the 30th of December, we received the first emergency call at about 8:45 in the morning. The swollen rivers and saturated ground meant that the rainfall had nowhere to go, and the impact on infrastructure was massive. There are 3 roads into Ballater, and as a result of the flooding, only 1 remained intact. And as a result of that, the closest resource outside of the single fire engine that was in Ballater had an additional 40 miles, which is 65 kilometres to travel. So the overall journey time for the next closest resource was 80 miles, which equals 130 kilometres. That single road that wasn't cut off did have other issues, as you will see later on in the presentation. It's very narrow, there were a number of trees blown over, and there was a large amount of surface water. So for specialist responder teams, it was a significantly challenging journey to get into Ballater. So the emergency phase of the incident lasted until the 4th of January at 9 o'clock in the evening. The fire station that all the resources were rendezvousing at and using was completely destroyed by the flooding, which presented additional challenges for the emergency response teams. The police and ambulance service both shared the facility in Ballater. It was also completely destroyed, and 365 homes and 54 businesses were severely flooded. The 4 main hotels in Ballater were damaged and unusable, and the local caravan park lost every single one of its 100 caravans, many of them being swept away or totally destroyed, and as we'll see on the pictures, they presented an additional hazard for the town. So this is the bridge in Ballater that crosses the River Dee. And we can see there that it's 1/2 of it's been completely destroyed by the flood water. Now that's not just significant because of the traffic that it transports, but if you can see hanging down into the water, we have main services that come into Ballater across that bridge. The main electrical input, the main water main were in that pile of pipes, and unfortunately they were all cut off as well. So they've got no water and no electricity for the residents of Ballater. This picture shows quite a famous footbridge over the River Dee in Ballater. This is a before picture, just to give you an indication of the height of the water that was experienced. So that's on a normal day. And at the time of the flood, you can see the difference there. That bridge survived, but it was badly damaged as a result of the flood water. It gives a good visual indication about the volume of water that was experienced. As I mentioned, the main road to Ballater, you can see here, is completely washed away. It's not just impassable, it's completely gone, so there is no opportunity to use that at all. The next road that would be available, again, completely washed away. So not just a case that it's challenging or it's got a lot of water on it or trees across it, it was completely removed by the flood water. And as I said, there was 1 remaining roadway in which was usable, but as we can see, half of it was removed by the floodwater, leaving only one lane open. So it was passable, but it was extremely vulnerable to any further erosion and had to be passed with care. So this picture gives an aerial view of the River Dee and some of the flooding that took place as a result of Storm Frank. And you can see there that the river more or less gets lost. It's just a mass of water that's spread across the fields and over the railway line, and straight, and then you can see Ballater on the top right of the picture there. The flooding continued into the streets of the village itself. You can see what that looks like here. So within the town itself, the water was up to entering into properties and into vehicles and very badly affected. It's the same street, just the opposite side of the street, looking across, and you can see the devastation that's been caused by the flood there. It's important to note that even when the flooding subsides, these properties are unusable for sometimes weeks, sometimes months. And this has a serious effect on the town, as these facilities provide pharmacies, doctors, supermarkets, butchers, bakers, and all of those facilities have to be brought in from somewhere else. And if I go back to the one road that was usable, that's the one road that had all the different provisions had to be brought in. So that presents a real challenge that had to be overcome. And as I've said, the fire station, the police and the ambulance stations were all destroyed, and we had to think about alternatives for that. I mentioned the caravan park was destroyed and the caravans swept away. These caravans become debris and get washed up further downriver. So all of these caravans either completely destroyed and fragmented, or as you can see by this picture here, ended up lodged into buildings further downriver, which creates a massive problem for making sure the building is structurally sound, that there's nobody trapped underneath, and then the removal of all the debris. So how did we respond? Overall, we had 19 fire appliances in attendance. The police were obviously in attendance as well, and the Scottish Ambulance Service mobilised its special operations team. Our Coast Guard agency sent 2 helicopters, and our mountain rescue teams supplied 4x4 vehicles. The response and rescue phase of the incident ended at 9 o'clock in the evening on the 4th of January, and it was a multi-agency effort, but it was a 24-hour operation for those full 6 days, which presents a tremendous strain on the rescuers, and the logistics to maintain that effort are not insignificant. So we did a full debrief of the incident and looked at the lessons that could be learned. All the fire stations in the area, not just of Ballater, but all along the River Dee, now have additional equipment, and they've all the personnel on those stations have now been trained to a higher level to respond to any future flooding. Every single home in Ballater was provided with flood defence measures to make sure that they could be safe from the risk of flooding. And a plan of local resilience was put in place, not just for Ballater, but for the neighbouring towns of Crathay and Braemar. Braemar, of course, is where the royal family's countryside residence is in Scotland, at Balmoral Castle. So a full debrief carried out and all the lessons learned fed back into that multi-agency planning effort, just to make sure that should such a flood happen again, that we are much better prepared for it. That's a very quick overview of the impact that Storm Frank had on Ballater and the response that took place as a result. Quite happy to take any questions that anybody might have.
Thank you very much, Bruce, for your presentation. Now, if some of the attendees has a question, please, you can write it in the chat and I can then read it for Bruce. Well, for the time being, I do have a question for you, Bruce, and it's regarding the regarding, of course, the HEIMDALL system. So the system that we're developing as part of the HEIMDALL project. Could you briefly just tell us how you think that the HEIMDALL project can be a beneficial tool to support the decision-making processes in such emergencies like the one that you just presented?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there are a couple of real benefits that HEIMDALL would bring to a situation like this. One of the lessons learned from the flooding in Ballater was the multi-agency communication, and that at no point was there a clear picture of what was happening or a commonly held understanding of the situation. HEIMDALL will be able to provide that information and communicate it out to all the different agencies in a very easy and comprehensive manner. So that would definitely be a benefit. One of the other situations was that they were trying to identify where best to focus their efforts. So the what-if analysis, the scenario analysis that HEIMDALL presents, where different scenarios can be run, if we put flood mitigation in one area, such as sandbags, how will that affect other areas? That would have been an invaluable resource to have at the instant in Ballater, and again, something that HEIMDALL could provide.
Okay, that was very clear. Thank you. Are there any other questions? Okay, so if there are no further questions, we can close the webinar here. So again, Bruce, thank you very much for your time, for your interesting presentation about the Ballater flood case.
Thank you.
And yep, and thank you also to all the people who has kindly joined the meeting. I hope you have also enjoyed it. So just to let you know, the HEIMDALL project is going on, and we are preparing the final demo event, which is due to take place at the end of March, concretely on the 26th of March. So yeah, in this case, we are preparing two simultaneous case studies, one based on the La Junquera fire in 2012, and the other one based on a flood event along the Ter River basin. So it's a good event that we are preparing, and we hope to see you all there. Well, goodbye, and thank you everyone again for attending the meeting. Bye bye.
Thank you.